do that on Friday. Let me give this out, if you don't mind your Khaled. What? It's in the piles, I can't figure it out. Yeah, I'll do it on Friday. I know this is just Hebrew, we don't have an English translation, but it's going to be a very small paragraph that I want to read. And I'll translate as we go along. And then I'll elaborate on it, explain it. Thank you. Page 165. Start with that. And (165). This is Sicha that the Rebbe gave in the year Tov Shinunal, 1991. And the date is Gimmel Tamuz. So it's actually the last time the Rebbe spoke on that day, where 3 years later, the Beis and Gimmel Adal, 3 years later, that was the day of Gimmel Tamuz. And this is one of the things the Rebbe said in that Sicha. So I'm looking at page 165 where it says Yud Beis. I'm going to read it not without reading the Hebrew and then translating, just reading it straight with the translation. After the Sicha elaborates on the subject of Mashiach and how we have to do everything to spread Torah, to spread mitzvahs, to spread Yiddishkeit, and to spread Emunah in the imminence of Mashiach's coming. So it says, however, there's a question that's being asked, and many people ask this question. Even if I will do everything that I need to do in a complete and perfect way, and I'm spreading the well springs of Torah in a proper way. But after all, we Jews are a minority in this world. Pasuk in Chumash, Atem ha'ma'at mikol ha'amim, you're the smallest of all the nations. Around us, there are 70 nations, which is an enormous amount of people compared to us. And we're like, the analogy that's given in the Torah, like a little sheep surrounded by 70 nations, 70 wolves. The reason why the Rebbe says 70 is because according to Torah, there are 70 nations. Even though today there are over 120 something or 40 nations, and they're all represented in the United Nations. But according to Torah, meaning to say that in essence, there are 70 nations, and each nation has its own angel and has its own spiritual entity. But the fact that there are more today means that there are branches and there are extensions of one of the 70 nations. But altogether, there are only 70. Which are the primary nations and which are the branches? We don't know. But what we could understand is that those nations which are more prominent, more influential, bigger in numbers, and bigger in their influence are probably for those that are of the 70. Like a country like America, France, and England, and Russia, and other countries that fall into that category. All the other countries, even though 1 million people in the country is also a lot, but they're extensions of the 70. So repeat as the Rebbe says and paraphrase this, read this in different words. What will the nations of the world say when they see a Yid doing his avodah of spreading Torah, and especially talking about Geula Mashiach? They don't understand it. In other words, yes, it's a very true thing. It's an amazing thing. But don't you have to take in consideration what the rest of the world is going to do, what the rest of the world is going to think? The answer is, the last paragraph is, Hamayna, meaning the answer is, the world is absolutely ready. If we Yidden will just do our avodah the way it should be, and do it in a way where we're not limiting ourselves, at the same time we do it in a proper way. In other words, you say you do something in a way that you're not restraining or limiting, it doesn't mean to do things in a wild way. do it in a way that people can understand, that people can relate to it. You will see how the world, let's turn the page, which means the nature of the world and the nations of the world, not only that they won't oppose you, but they'll actually be helping you. It's a very powerful statement. What they're ever saying is that the world out there, when you say the world out there, generally speaking, it means nature. Wait, I told you once, when you look in the Torah, or especially if you read a Sicha, and you read it, and you put your head inside, Mashiach is coming, you're all excited, you're smiling, but as soon as you walk out the building, and you see, or especially if you take a train to Manhattan, you walk out the train station. Yeah. Mashiach, like the world looks like nothing is changing. And especially if you open up the news and you read the news. So they're ever saying, but if you will look properly, you'll see, you just do what you have to do, and you will see that the nations of the world and the nature of the world and things that are happening in the world, not only they're not going to get in the way, they'll actually help you in bringing Mashiach. So that's what I want to talk about now. In what way? What does that mean? How can we say that? It means a lot of things. Some of the things we spoke about during the year, some of the things new things we can talk about now. But the first thing is like this. One of the things which, if you remember, we spoke about this during the year, and I gave out some articles, is science. Science is the world of nature. Science is the world that explains everything according to nature. And not only that, science is the place, which is the main source in recent history that denies the existence of God. Everything is explained scientifically. Everything has to have a scientific reason why it's happening, how it's happening. The world came about through evolution, they say, and all the other things that go along with it. And that's the reason why years ago, everyone believed in God. They had different gods they believed in. But they believed that there's a creator to the universe, someone running the world. But this belief, which is so acceptable today, especially by the intellectuals, is that no, everything is science. If you remember, I showed you an article where the article was written by Science magazine, not by a rabbi. And the Science magazine, and whoever wants, I can bring those articles again on Friday, talks about the fact that science has become one of the sources that actually are starting to prove the existence of God through different things that science has discovered. The more they understand, the more they study science, the more there is actually like they're right. This is the most unexpected place to find proof of God actually is in science. So the fact that a person could be studying science and studying secular studies about different subjects, and from there, actually that'll be the proof and that'll be the support that Hashem exists and He's the one who created us, which basically means we have a purpose and we have something to fulfill. All that means that the world itself is assisting us in accepting Hashem and believing in Hashem. That's number one. Number two, we know that throughout the ages in Judaism, there were different movements that tried to sort of deviate from the straight line of Torah. In fact, when was the first of those movements started? Anyone know? That's pretty good, but there's even something earlier than that. It's in the Chumash. There were already people who were opposing Moshe Rabbeinu. What? Korach made a movement to oppose Moshe Rabbeinu. What he's doing is wrong. We have to do things differently. That was, and even before that, you might say the ones who made the golden calf. That was also a movement of worshiping an actual idol. So all these people, nothing became of them. Not that, and not Korach. And then now you mentioned the Tzedukkim. That was a very powerful movement. And for many years, it's very powerful. And they had a lot of followers. It means people who believed only in the written Torah, and they didn't believe in the oral Torah. I didn't mention it yesterday, but remember I showed you the tefillin? So every place in the Torah it talks about tefillin, says you should put them on your head between your eyes. I wanted to show you. They put it over here, right? It says between your eyes. How do we know it's not over here? As the oral Torah says, no, it's on the head between the eyes. But it's not physically between the eyes. It says in the Torah that on Shabbos you shouldn't leave your house or you shouldn't leave your place. So the Gemara says it means you can't go more than 2,000 amos from where you live. They say, no, it means you can't walk out of your house. So Shabbos, you stay in your house the whole day. It's things like that. So it was a very strong movement at a certain time. It also became nothing. Movement after movement after movement. In recent history, the movements which opposed Judaism was Reform, Conservative. So these were movements. Reform is a movement that totally took on, new beliefs. Conservative, as you know, there's a crisis in the dorms, so I'm just waiting. I'm holding the phone open to call us back about the gas, to put it back on. Hopefully we'll hear from them. What? There's no hot water.
I didn't know. Yes. So did I. I don't know if it's just your problem, but my apartment is.
You're so connected to the door. Oh, I better check my house. What's happening in my apartment? That's when that happened last night. Oh, so you're the culprit. So these movements are the ones that unfortunately it began with people who are like sort of knowledgeable of Torah and they wanted to make reform. Like the person who was the founder of the reform movement, his name was Moshe Mendelssohn. You know the history, he studied Torah, he wrote a book on a commentary of Torah, and he wanted to make certain reforms, but he wasn't in any way against Judaism. He wanted to reform Judaism. But his children already converted to Christianity. And many of the people that followed him eventually assimilated. And really the fact that today we have millions of Jews that are totally unaffiliated with Judaism, it's all a result of that movement. So the fact that there are people who are not following Torah mitzvahs, that's one thing. But when there's a movement, that's something which is really standing in the way of fighting Judaism. These movements, both reform and conservative, are becoming weaker and weaker from day to day. I'm not saying that everybody in the world is becoming religious, but the movements are becoming weaker. Just to give you a technical example, the headquarters of the reform movement, the biggest place, the most prominent place, is in Cincinnati, where they have a place called the Hebrew Union HUC, Hebrew Union College. And that's where they train them to be rabbis. It's a huge campus, and a few years ago, it was closed down. Why was it closed down? Not because they had too many people that wanted to come. It closed down because less people are interested in going there. They have another big campus in Manhattan. Just a few months ago, it was in the newspaper that they had to downsize. So they bought another building which was smaller and gave the bigger building to some other organization. They have another campus in California. They had to downsize that too. Why is all this downsizing? Because the movement is getting less and less people interested. Yeah.
So people aren't necessarily.
On one hand, it's not because so many people became religious. There's nobody left who wants to be not religious. People are becoming religious, but at the same time, if you look at the numbers of intermarriage, it's unfortunately getting worse and worse. But movements that is leading people away, that's dying down. In fact, the reform movements themselves had this big meeting, it was a few years ago. Once in 30 years, they have this huge, all the leaders of reform come together, and they said, we're losing members. Why don't we do what Chabad does? We should learn from them. And they spoke about what they can do. And one of the things that came from, we have to introduce more Judaism, more spirituality in the movement. Talk about belief in God. These are things that they don't really follow. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but if you're familiar with the reform movement, very, very far from what Judaism is really all about. They don't just say they believe in God or Torah. It's just Judaism. And I don't know if I told you this. Unfortunately, my father passed away young. We're talking about passed away over 50 years ago. And there was a nurse that was very, very impressed with. She was asking questions, and he gave her answers, and she was really very impressed with what he had to tell her. So one day she said to him, "Next week I'm going to go to the synagogue to pray for you." She wasn't Jewish. She said, "How are you going to go to the synagogue?" She says, "Oh, I live on Long Island. We have an arrangement with the Reformed Temple that one week all the Jews come to pray in the church, and the other week all of us go to pray in the synagogue." And she laughs. It's funny. The week that the Jews are supposed to come to the church, they're all showing up. But the week that people are supposed to go to the synagogue, not too many people come to the synagogue. In other words, the Reformed Jews come running to the church to show that, we really accept everybody. And she actually is one of those that doesn't go to the synagogue. But this week she said she'll go and she'll pray. Could you imagine a shul with a rabbi leading people that once a week they go pray in a church? So it's totally not Judaism. It's just a movement of I don't know, Jewish culture, things like that. So it's very clear. You read the articles, you go online, you'll see clearly both the Reform and the Conservative. These movements are dying down, which means that people are recognizing true Judaism is really growing, and this is something which is becoming less and less. So we're seeing this among Jews. What do we see amongst non-Jews? We see among non-Jews a surge in a way that never seen before. We spoke about this in class, about the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach. That's thousands and thousands of people try to live by following the 7 Noach laws. And that's something, again, which is pretty much unprecedented in history. I think there's another thing we see amongst non-Jews is the fact, even though we see the anti-Semitism and countries are coming out against Israel and things like that, but on the other hand, there are also other countries which are speaking out in support of Israel in a way like we've never seen before. Actually, yesterday was an interesting story. I don't know if you saw it, but it's been circulating on the internet that the president of Argentina visited Israel, and he met with the prime minister. What does one president give another president a gift? Something silver, gold, I don't know. What was his gift that he gave him? He gave him a painting of Netanyahu speaking to the Rebbe. And what was the conversation? The conversation was about the Rebbe. Netanyahu tells him what the Rebbe told him, and he asks questions. We're talking about a president of a country, Argentina. By the way, and not to say anything against Argentina, chas v'shalom, but Argentina, in a way, is worse than other countries. They're the ones that took in all the Nazis. They're the ones that protected them for all these years. That's where Eichmann came from, And nevertheless, this is what you're seeing happening in the country. It's not Jewish, and nevertheless, the respect for Judaism, respect for Torah, the love for Israel is unbelievable. He speaks about it openly, and also making the comment that this is the land that Hashem gave to the Jewish people, and it belongs to the Jewish people because Hashem gave it to them. They're not saying because of the mandate of the British, that the British said that this belongs to the Jews. It's because the Torah says this is something probably never came out of the mouth of non-Jewish leaders ever before. And now it's something which we hear it from America, we hear it from Argentina, we hear it from some other countries that can't even pronounce their names, and they're all joining in that way. There's another level. One of the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach is, of course, to be kind to other people, to give tzedakah, to help other people. Again, go online, you'll see so movements and movements of acts of kindness and things to do for just to be an act of kindness to another person, being promoted, or tzedakah being promoted. Some of the greatest billionaires in the world, like Bill Gates and what's this other guy's name? Elon Musk and the other one, Buffett. These are all talking about how much money they're giving away. One is saying he's giving away his whole possession to tzedakah, and the other one says he's going to give 3/4 of the possession to tzedakah. And one of them is actually is trying to organize that everybody should give a lot of money for tzedakah. These are things which are not really. This was always a very big emphasis in Yiddishkeit, not in the rest of the world. Another thing is, which is, if you remember in the beginning of the year, one of the things we brought down was the Zohar, that the Zohar says something which was an open prophecy. And that was that he actually gives us time. He says in the year 5,600, we're going to see new wisdom in the world, new wisdom in Torah, and new wisdom in the secularism, in the sciences. And basically, that's the time when Hasidus began to be spread in the world, which are the deeper secrets of Torah, which were always there, but was hidden. It wasn't there for the public. And the second thing is that's when all the different scientific things began to come out in the open, and to the point where we have a world that we have today. So basically, the Ram, it's not only that he gives this prophecy, but he says this will be a preparation for Mashiach. The new wisdom that will be revealed will be a preparation for Mashiach. And what we're seeing today is way, way beyond anything that we've ever seen before. And also in the area of technology in general, in the area of health, there's actually an expression, so Mashiach will come, there'll be a new heaven and there'll be a new earth. It doesn't mean that the earth is going to disappear, there'll be new earth in its place. It'll be a new world. I don't think there was ever a time that you can ever say the world is like totally new, unrecognizable compared to the way it was. Try to imagine someone who lived 100 years ago would come out of his grave and walk around the streets today. There's nothing that would make sense then. What are you doing? I'm talking to my friend in Israel. You have a good doctor, a friend in Israel? Okay. I mean, what's going on today is actually crazy. It's incredible. Today, people, and not just on a technical level, on a spiritual level, people could study Torah 24 hours a day. Torah is accessible to you. You can open up a computer or a phone and you can learn Gemara, you can learn Mishnah, you can learn Chassidus, you can learn Halacha. Not just learn, you can have a teacher teaching you. You can have questions and answers. And you can be living on an island as long as there's some power there, there's Wi-Fi. You can basically use this, things are happening. The nature of the world is helping us learn Torah in a way like never before. Also, people that are getting involved in Yiddishkeit, a lot of people, when they ask them, where did it all begin? With Shliach? What's a Shliach? Where'd you get involved in Judaism? Oh, I went on the internet. I was interested in looking for something about Judaism. I saw this, I read that. So it's just happening from something which is, like I said, technology is enhancing the world on a spirit. Of course, there's a lot of garbage that comes out of technology, but on the other hand, it's also doing things in Kedusha, which are sort of transcending all limitations, things that a person who lives in this, who knows, far out place could never have any connection to Yiddishkeit only because of this. And when we talk about how the world is changing in health-wise, I mean, just to think of it, I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm not a doctor, but if you have a doctor sitting here, it'll give you a list, you know, and start speaking, and know when it'll ever end. But just the things that we know, can do a heart transplant, a liver transplant. These are people that never would make it. Do a kidney transplant. These are things that are life-saving, and it was never. No one ever dreamed years ago that it would be possible to actually take a heart out of one person and put a heart from another person and save this person's life, and everything else that goes along with it. Children that are born today, a lot of people that they could not have any children. And again, if not for the new technology and medicine, there's no way there are tens of thousands of children today that are born as a result of all these new things in technology. So on one hand, you can say, well, science is doing great. On the other hand, the Zohar said this 1,800 years ago. You're going to see in this year 5,600, you're going to see new wisdom in the world, And we're witnessing, we're watching this. This is all showing us. I mean, the fact that the Rebbe says the world will help you. Years ago, if you would tell somebody, we believe in Mashiach, we believe that people will live for hundreds of years, they would laugh at you. How could you be so chaotic? Today, scientists are talking about being able to live for hundreds of years because of what because of the way science is discovering different things, how they they can change different things in the body, they can work with the cells. I mean, they're not there yet, but they're definitely talking about it. And who's talking about it? Not because of Mashiach. They're talking about it because of science. And I think I mentioned in class, I showed you an article. It was by, I think it was Bill Gates, who they interviewed, and same thing with Musk, when they interviewed and said, listen, with artificial intelligence, soon will be a time that everything will be taken care of. Everything will be done by artificial intelligence. What are people going to do with their lives? It's going to be a disaster. So he says, they both said, I guess people just have to pursue something more meaningful in life, like spirituality or whatever. What does it say about Mashiach? When Mashiach will come, everyone will be occupied with knowing more about Hashem. How could you imagine that? What's going to happen with all the things that need to be done? We'll have robots running around. They're going to do all the work. And people are going to be, I mean, just the fact that you can talk about subjects of Torah, subjects of Mashiach rather, in a way that it's very real to people. You can relate to it in a real way. Why is it? Because we're getting close to that time. So what the Rebbe is saying is, don't be afraid to talk about it to anyone thinking, oh, they'll think I'm off the wall, this and that. You do your avodah properly, and you say it sincerely, and you say it in a way that a person could relate to it. In other words, you can't just say it and say, I'm speaking to their neshama. You have to explain what you're saying. Today is a time that not only that they won't oppose you, you'll see things in the world will actually help you. Like, for example, even publicizing Mashiach. Years ago, if you wanted to publicize Mashiach, how many people could you reach to publicize Mashiach? Whoever lives in your shtetl, or lives in your town, you'll give out some a flyer or something. Today, people are posting things about Mashiach and being read by millions and millions of people, and millions of people are inspired by it. And every person has the opportunity to do that. Like years ago, even once they had technology, you could tell somebody, how could you give a message that the whole world will listen to? I don't know. I don't own a radio company and I don't own a television company. How can I say something that the whole world will listen to? Today, you don't have to. Every single person gets on this thing and he can send out a message, will be seen and read by millions of people and inspire millions of people. And it's being done that way, which means that one of the ways of publicizing Torah, publicizing mitzvahs, publicizing Yiddishkeit, and also publicizing Mashiach's coming, is through this. This morning, someone sent me a clip of a very popular radio program. It says the most popular television or radio program in Israel. And this guy is saying, I don't understand, I don't know who he's talking to, but apparently there's a little bit of commotion now in Israel about Mashiach, that people believe Mashiach. Maybe it's about going on the Temple Mountain. And this guy is saying, what's your problem with Mashiach? Isn't that part of Judaism? It's a major part of Judaism, that Jews believe that Mashiach is going to come. It's one of the 13 principles. And I'm listening, who's speaking? The guy doesn't have a yarmulke on his head. He's the anchor of radio or television. And he's talking to millions of people and telling them how Mashiach is something very real. In other words, these are the sources that we'd be afraid of, make fun, and these are the people that are now publicizing that something of Mashiach could be very real and very true. Even Tchias HaMesim. Yes, Laura.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, I think someone asked this question before, but why is it the coming of Mashiach talked about so much in circles outside of God?
Why is it not?
Yeah, like why can we not talk about it?
First of all, I think it depends. Even outside Chabad, certain circles have started to talking much more about it. But mainly in Chabad, because the Rebbe is the one that made that announcement that the miracles we're witnessing today are all part of the process of Mashiach coming, and that we all have a responsibility to make it happen sooner. I mean, there's a certain belief that Mashiach is, we believe it, it's amazing, but it's not in our hands. We just have to trust Hashem when the time will come. The Rebbe's opinion is, and it's not really the Rebbe's homemade opinion, in this class we went through many sources that there's things we can do to make it happen sooner. So being that now we're in that time, this is crunch time, so to speak, and therefore the Rebbe kept demanding of us to do everything we can to bring Mashiach. So that's why there's more of a commotion here. But if I'm not mistaken, it's spreading to many more communities. I saw, again, flyers and advertisements of communities getting together on certain days, and the people who are leading it are actually rabbis who are like Lithuanian rabbis in Lakewood, in Muncie, in Bnei Brak, in Yerushalayim, in places outside of Chabad. And they're also having people gather together and just make a gathering to make ourselves more conscious and to beg and plead with Hashem to send Mashiach. So again, if you look around, you'll probably see this online. Other communities outside of Chabad, yes, there's still certain communities that are not into it, but nevertheless, it's, I think, in a process of spreading now more than ever, especially since October 7th. Even that, that so many Jews are doing tshuva. You're familiar, after the Holocaust, what do you think happened? More Jews became more religious or more Jews became less religious? After the Holocaust. Less. A lot of people went very far away. Like, I remember there was a student here in school, everything about her name and everything about it was totally Christian. And she said her parents were survivors and they wanted to make sure that there's no trace left. No one would ever know that they're Jewish, just for safety. And that's how she grew up. And a lot of people did that. They distanced themselves. They were so angry. I mean, how could you be angry at God that you don't believe in? But if you do believe in him, then if you believe in him, you can't be angry. He knows what he's doing. If you don't believe in him, then who are you angry at? But unfortunately, it's an emotional thing, and you can't blame anyone who went through the Holocaust because there's no words to describe the atrocities that they saw, and people losing their whole families, and the sadistic way things were done. Unfortunately, 6 million, kind of number that is. When somebody is killed, it's a big commotion. This person was killed. 6 million, 1 million children. So we can't blame anyone, unfortunately, for going in that direction. But how do you explain that here, when they also saw, unfortunately, horrible things, a lot of these people are actually coming closer to Yiddishkeit. The hostages themselves, a lot of them had nothing to do with Judaism. It being hostages made them more closer to Hashem. And when they came out, they wanted to go out and speak and talk to people about being more connected to Hashem. The only way you can explain it is this is what it says in the prophecy before Mashiach comes. We're going to see both. We're going to see, unfortunately, a lot of hatred coming out and a lot of negative things. But at the same time, we'll also see a lot of Jews coming closer to Hashem. There's the only way you can explain it. It's a spiritual phenomenon that we're witnessing in front of our eyes. So after learning everything about it, the next step is to begin to understand how we're in the time that it's happening. We're in the process. And our responsibility is to make it happen sooner. And how do we make it happen sooner? These are the classes we have throughout the year. It's through learning about Mashiach, through spreading emun in Mashiach, and through publicizing to out there that Mashiach is coming. And the main thing is, Rabbi uses a term to stop living Mashiach. Living Mashiach means what? First of all, it means to be in an upbeat mode, and not to be down. And when anything goes wrong, to believe that very soon things will turn around and they'll change. Today is actually a historic day on the calendar in Chabad. This is the day that the previous Rebbe was arrested in Russia, if you know the story. He was arrested by whom? It was a group of Jews who called themselves Yev Seksia, which means the Jewish section of the communists. They were more brutal than the communists themselves. And they were into uprooting anything Jewish, closing down shuls and closing down mikveh and closing down yeshivas, arresting people, killing people, shooting people. The previous Rebbe had an enormous underground movement strengthening learning and yeshivas and mikvahs and kashrus, shchita. Everything was happening, and he was the one organizing it all, and but it was happening in a secretive way. And they knew about it, and they realized where it's coming from, and eventually they arrested him with the intention to execute him. And the day that they arrested him was today, the 15th of Sicha. And who arrested him? Two Jewish kids in their 20s. And they were very brutal. It was a miracle. The intention was that within 24 hours, they would finish. That night that they arrested him, they arrested 12 other religious leaders. And every one of them was executed that night, except for the Frierdiker Rebbe, through a miraculous thing that happened. Eventually, he was in jail for 10, 11 days. Then they was in jail altogether. And when it was after being in jail for a while, there was a big commotion. They worked with other countries that put pressure on Russia. And eventually, they freed him. And but they freed him on the condition that he'll go to a city called Kostroma, which is hundreds of miles away, and he'd be confined to that city for 3 years. So make sure that he doesn't do anything, can control him and monitor every movement. He was in that city for 1 week, and then he was freed completely on the 12th of Tammuz, and it's a big holiday. But today is the day that he was arrested. I just want to give you an example. What does it mean to live Mashiach? So is this day a sad day? Is it a happy day? What kind of day is it? I would think it's a very sad day. On this day, he was arrested. The Rebbe actually writes that this day is a day that's a day that has a lot of spiritual opportunity because it's the beginning of his redemption. He was released from jail in a miraculous way. And as a result of that, many other amazing things happened by him going out of jail. It strengthened Judaism in Russia on a whole new level. So even though today's the day he was arrested, but today's the day that his liberation began. That's how the Rebbe looks at it. I gave the example. It's like when you plant a seed in the ground, what are you doing? You're taking a seed and you're throwing it away. And where are you putting it? In the ground. It's covered with the earth. And what's happening to it under the ground? It decomposes. But eventually a tree is going to grow out of the seed. So how do you look at it when you put the seed in the ground? Are you crying because you just lost a seed? Or you're excited because the tree is going to grow? So as Rebbe is saying, now in retrospect, we look back, we see that his arrest would actually lead to all the amazing things that happened after he was arrested. So it's a positive day. In fact, there was a chassid that his son was supposed to get married on this day. So he arranged that the wedding will be very late. Because after sundown, it's already the next day. So it wouldn't be on this day, the 15th. So Rebbe wrote to him, no, actually make it on this day because this day is a very special day in a positive way. So it's a Mashiach way of looking at things. We know that everything that's happening now is really for the good. We don't see it. When Mashiach comes, that's when we'll see how everything that happened now, which was negative, was really for a positive purpose. To live Mashiach that means that already now we start relating that way. When something happens, instead of falling apart and having a meltdown and getting all angry and screaming and shouting or getting depressed, we say to ourselves, this is all coming from Hashem and it's for good. And it's so clear in my mind that it's as if I already see the good that's there and they calm down. So that's a way of living Mashiach. To look at everything when it is on a deeper level and the way it'll be eventually once Mashiach comes. So start seeing it now from that perspective. Okay, to be continued.
Yeah, it's a different schedule today.